everybody. So I'm going to be talking about some pretty disturbing stuff in this video. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm going to share some of the documentation from my time in foster care. I really wish that I didn't request any of these documents, but I did, and it really reiterates how fucking disgusting my parents were. And it reiterates how much I suffered as a child. When my mother died in 2024, I searched through her papers looking for answers as to what was wrong with her. All I got was that she had psychosis, but I'm pretty sure it was schizophrenia. I made the mistake of allowing my mother to live with me as an adult twice because I was trying to help her. The first time I heard her in the basement doing laundry. It was a rental on the military base, and she was talking to herself about oral sex. At that point, I just fucking lost my mind. I called her doctor and I told her everything. Eventually, I saw that she was prescribed Abilify, which is an antipsychotic. But she didn't take that for very long. There is no doubt in my mind that my father is a psychopath. An aunt told me that my father tortured my dog to death when I was a kid. It got out of the yard and got pregnant, and while my father was torturing it, he was calling her a little bitch. He also went to jail for sexual assault in 1977, right after I turned 1. He was found guilty on November 26th, which was my mother's 24th birthday. I wish I never ordered those transcripts, but I wanted to find out if he committed the crime while my mother was pregnant with me. It turns out that she wasn't pregnant with me at the time, but they were married. I explained to the judge why I wanted those transcripts, and I was honest. I said, at the time I was a proud Canadian. I said, I've served my country for 18 years, and I don't understand why my father wasn't deported, and I'm looking for answers. I wanted to find out more information about this heinous act he has committed. I was very honest, and she approved my request. Now I have his court transcripts because the Vancouver Supreme Court holds transcripts for 80 years. Now, I didn't talk about being in foster care for many years, especially during my military service, because gossip goes around like wildfire, and I didn't want people to talk about me as the old foster kid, things like that. That was very personal to me, and I used to be really embarrassed about my upbringing. Sometimes I didn't want to share because I was worried people wouldn't believe me because it sounds so fucking far-fetched and so bizarre. Now, I mean, I don't really care whether or not people believe me, but I'm sharing my story now because it's mine to tell. I see it as part of my healing journey, and I'm reaching out to others in hopes to let other people know that they're not alone. My father's excuse for being cruel to me over the years was that at least he's never hit me. Set such a terrible example of how a man treats a woman. He was abusive to my mother. He was mean to me as a child. And I found myself continually in abusive situations throughout my life, throughout my adulthood. My parents were calling me a whore when I was as young as 10 years old. I jumped out of a second floor bedroom window to get away from my mother. And to this day, my father insists that I jumped out of that window because I had this overwhelming desire to prostitute myself. I was 11 years old. My mother used to watch me sleep, and if I was making noises in my mouth, she thought that I was doing something sexually to my father spiritually. She would wake me up by either hitting me or pulling my hair, and she called me these terrible names. It was awful. Now, the first time I let my mother live with me, I was able to get rid of her by getting rid of my rental. I was moving in with a guy I was dating, and I found her an apartment. Well, she boycotted this, and I didn't realize until the last day before moving out that she didn't pack a single belonging of hers in her bedroom. So I spent the whole evening packing her things. I stayed up all night. I had no sleep. I was still having to clean while she sat there and giggled like a child. At that time, I was going through hell because I filed a sexual harassment complaint against a supervisor, and I was facing a lot of retaliation. So I was going through hell at work, and then I would go home to deal with fucking hell because of my mother. During my military service, I started using alcohol to cope with my problems. I've had some really, really awful experiences that I don't want to talk about, but I was using alcohol to cope. And although I know it's very unhealthy, I still turn to it today when I'm having a lot of stress and when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It numbs me for a little while, but it just makes me worse, and I know that. I let my mother move in with me a second time when I bought this house, and she stayed here for 12 years. I had to wait for her to die. She was continually here. She didn't have any friends aside from one psycho woman in Vancouver whom she spoke with on the phone once in a while. She had no hobbies. She was continually in my house, and the only time she went anywhere was when I took her. The Landlord and Tenant Act does not apply when you are cohabitating with someone, so I couldn't evict her. With regards to her mental illness, she associated everything with some sort of dirty vulgarity. I couldn't even take a crap in peace. She would knock on the door asking me what I'm doing in there for so long. She associated the act of shitting, of my pooping, with casting black magic spells on her. Now, I didn't know this, but one time when my mother woke me up, hitting me, my friend was over spending the night for a sleepover, so she couldn't even give me a break for one night to have a sleepover. And as an adult, this woman told me that she was there and she was frightened. I must have shut that out because it was humiliating. I don't know. Because I allowed my mother to move in with me the second time, my depression became so severe. I tried to maintain harmony. I tried to make it work. I tried to be pleasant, but eventually I went literally insane. I had a camper and I used to go on camping trips just to get away from her. I was living in my driveway in the camper to get the fuck away from her. I would sit at my computer in my living room and I could hear her coming down the stairs. Clump, 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 clump. And it just, I cringed. I would be so angry, so anxious. And then once her slippers hit the fucking laminate after she finished walking down the stairs, slap, slap, slap. And there she was coming to fucking hassle me. My depression was so bad that this is what my house looked like at one point. To part ways with my camper because of extensive water damage, I would often just hide in my bedroom. In my own fucking house that I bought with my own money. Here my father is saying that he had nothing to do with me. He just let my mother take care of me. That is pretty much true. He had a full-time job always as a steel fabricator as well as a part-time job. He earned a pension from his full-time job, and I'm pretty sure for the entire 40 plus years that he worked at that part-time job, it was always under the table, so he wasn't even paying taxes. After reading my foster care documents, it became quite evident that my father was just angry that he had to pay for the government to support me. Here you can see he was angry that they were taking full custody of me because he didn't want to keep paying. But the social worker told him that he no longer had to pay once they had full custody. I was running away from the homes when I was 15, but on my own with an abusive guy, go figure. And quite often I had no money, no food, but in one of the foster homes I was being molested by the foster mother's adult son. In another foster home, we were only kept for money. We were treated like shit. And then in one group home, I was afraid of some of the other children because they were involved in some criminal activity. It's quite common with children in foster care. Now, eventually, the man I was living with, the guy, I think he was, 17 or 18, we eventually had nowhere to live. We had to leave that basement suite that became a flop house. And we stayed in a hotel called the Turf Hotel. I was fucking starving. And I went, because it was just a couple blocks from my family home, I went and sat in the field across the street from the house, and I stared at the house, and I was too afraid to go ask my father for some money for food or for some food, because he had a woman living there who really didn't like me, and he didn't want to talk to me either. So I eventually just got up and left. By the time I was 17, I was able to collect an allowance from the government called Independent Living Allowance. It's for foster kids. But my father let me move into his house for about a year. No child should have to rely on government assistance to live with her father. I did get free coffee and the odd pork hamburger patty he'd make. He eventually stopped paying the mortgage. My mother was suing for her half of the house. They had separated when I went into foster care. So she was suing for her half of the house. He stopped paying the mortgage, so it went foreclosure. And he would sit at the kitchen table with this fucking smug grin on his face. He'd lick his thumb and he would start counting all his cash out loud. Pure fucking greed. And he would be generous with me as an adult on his terms once in a while. However, I met up with his ex-girlfriend last time I was in Vancouver, and she told me my father insisted that I was after his money. I could tell he was starting to get a little weird. He was telling me he was having like money trouble or something, and he couldn't afford to pay for my visits out there. Stuff like that. It was just really odd. He kept talking about money and how he didn't have it and he couldn't afford to do this or that with me. He was continually talking about money, and then he kept saying that his girlfriend pays for half of everything, or she offers to pay, and he would continually talk about that. And I'm like, well, I don't care. Like, why are you telling me all this? Well, it turns out he always paid for her, but he was just saying that because he wanted to, I don't know, make himself sound like he was struggling financially or something. But I knew the whole time he had a lot of money saved up in the bank because he used to talk about it all the time, and he would brag that he would buy a new car in cash. But his ex-girlfriend told me that he was literally obsessed with the fact that he thought I was after his money. He also would go to Burnaby Park, where a lot of seniors hang out, and he would brag to them about all of his money. Seniors who probably paid taxes their whole lives and paid to support their own children, who probably don't have much money themselves. And he would brag to them. He would also say, my dead ex-wife is no longer collecting my pension. He is truly a disgusting man. Another aunt, I think she has passed away now, but there has been a family feud for years and years, and I think her husband set the house on fire. Well, that's what my father said, but there was a fire. Half of the house is burned down. And when I visited my father last, it was in 2023, he would drive me to that house, and he would sit there just deriving joy at this burned down house. And the security guard there was like looking at us like, what the fuck are you doing? My dad would continually want to look at this burned house, deriving joy from it. So the list he is referring to here is actually the court transcripts that I ordered. He tried to extort $4,000 from me. He threatened to report me for something that really wasn't a big deal, but he wanted me to give him $4,000 that he gave me in 2004 to put a down payment on a car. I said, no, I'm not giving him anything. And then I sent him a photo of the court transcripts. Now, I can't share the insides of the court transcripts, but I showed him the cover page and how big the stack of paper was. First thing he said was, how much did that cost you? He is literally obsessed with money. I started to stand up to him in 2023. I was visiting my ex-boyfriend's family in Kelowna, and I was messaging with my father via email, and he told me to take photos of the family members so that he could laugh at them. I said no. And then I had to spend the whole weekend in those people's home with that guilt, knowing that my father wanted to do that. But I stood up to him and I said, no, these people are being nice to me and I am not going to do something like that. He actually said, okay, and he left it. I couldn't believe it. I was so proud of myself. And then that Christmas, at the end of December, he went no contact with me because I purchased a dishwasher for myself. He called me a pig, obese pig with a fat ass, and he said that I should be washing dishes by hand. He also told me that I must get rid of my dogs because my mother has gone to the hospital to die and there's nobody left to help me care for them. And I said no to both. Here, my mother is speaking to a social worker with her delusional speech. Everything was associated with vulgarity to her, and I don't understand why, but it was so disgusting. She would often talk about how she was always under spiritual attack. She was under attack by Masons, Nazis, succubus, incubus, octopuses with 8 limbs. Like, this is completely fucking bizarre. She was also under attack from teachers in my school, their children's parents. I don't understand what made her think that she was so fucking important that everybody was wanting to attack her. Here are notes from another conversation a social worker had with her. I guess you don't have to be able to spell in order to be a social worker, but here you go. She's saying, wants no parasites, incubus, succubus for my daughter. I will not let authorities plant parasites on my child. I'm glad I received these documents after her death because I probably would have walked right up to her deathbed and fucking screamed at her. I read multiple times in these documents that my mother was trying to get rid of me. She kept asking the government to take full custody of me. We were on really bad terms when she died, and I don't even feel bad about it. I want to be able to mourn and grieve my mother like regular people do. I did grieve because she was still my mother, but it wasn't like how regular people do. Before she went to the hospital to die, I was actually looking for a room to rent, and I was going to move out of my own house. I was having a hard time finding a lawyer to get a court order to have her removed from my home, and it likely wouldn't have happened because she was a senior and she had cancer. I guess for some reason people just expected me to be responsible for her fucking care, to provide her with a home. I begged her to leave. I screamed, and she would just laugh. Her cancer was back for about 7 years before she died. The day before she received her diagnosis, she tried on a pair of AC/DC devil horns, and I took a photo of her. Her friend, the fucking psychopath in Vancouver, told her that the reason why her cancer returned is because she put on those devil horns, and she believed her. After she died, I found all of these weird papers in her wallet and in her files. These are healing frequencies, and this fucking loony would write out these numbers thinking that they were helping her. Curing cancer, against black magic, wanting Archangel Metatron. Fucking weird, man. She would continually stream online and listen to headphones listening to these frequencies. She was getting healed and getting these subliminal messages. It was so, it drove me insane. I literally went insane. I Googled her and I found she was making comments on these YouTube videos. I can't find them now, but people would do these, I guess it's called light language, and they would talk and they'd wave their hands around. My mother would continually watch these thinking that it was healing her. She had such extreme religious beliefs, and she would comment on videos saying, I welcome this healing, amen and amen. She always had to say amen twice. I guess that makes it more official. I don't know. I am just glad she is dead and she is gone. And I'm glad my father is no longer in my life. I'm an empath, and I also have a really bad problem with people pleasing. I am extremely forgiving as well. And I would often find myself apologizing to my father just to maintain harmony, even though I did nothing wrong. When he would get mad and he would be mean to me, I would cry, I would beg, I would apologize until he felt better, and then everything was good again. So as I said earlier, the family home, the mortgage went for closure because he stopped paying, and then he would count all his cash at the table, and he just had this smug grin on his face. This guy is riddled with greed. And eventually the house had to be sold, and I had to move back out on my own. When I moved out and he had to leave the house, he ripped the front porch off of the house. He was taking a chainsaw to the furniture. He spray painted the walls, including a large swastika on one of the walls. And he abandoned the family dog. I had to go take her and find a place for her to live. However, my childhood bestie at the time, they took her in, but then she was upset that her mommy wouldn't let her get a puppy. So I had to find another place for the dog. But then those people didn't want her, and eventually I had to take her to the Humane Society. That was left on me because I couldn't keep a dog in that little tiny apartment I was renting. They didn't allow pets, and there was no way I could hide a large dog in that little tiny apartment. There was no way I could have afforded a house. And that will never leave me, having to take my dog to the Humane Society. Here, my parents were speaking with a social worker. My mother was speaking with a social worker on the phone. My father was drunk in the background, and I was missing. I was running away from those homes, like I said. And my father said he's going to pay a white pimp to find me. They were convinced that I was a sex worker when I was a child. It is so bizarre. Here's my mother with a delusional speech again. Parasites were hurting me, and she's mourning my spiritual death. She had such fucking bizarre beliefs that when she went to the hospital to die, she accused my ex-boyfriend of making her sick. She said that he used her bathroom, which caused her to have a kidney infection because he brings in poison on his clothing from the workplace. Now, that bathroom wasn't hers. It was the main bathroom upstairs. He used it. I told him, please do not use that bathroom again because my mother will get really fucking weird about it. Only use the one in my master bedroom or use the one downstairs. And yeah, she did get weird about it. And a couple months later, she went to the hospital and she blamed it on my ex. It was via text that she said this, and she also said that she had a dream where he opened the door to the house and all these black spirits and clouds were flowing out the door, and that she doesn't want him to be coming to the house anymore when she comes home. She did come home from the hospital back here. No, I hate saying come home, but she came back from the hospital for a little while, and then she went back to the hospital again, and then not too long, a few months later, she died. Now, my mother was believing that she was getting better, and I didn't understand what was going on, and I literally begged the social worker of the hospital not to let her come back here. I was begging. Now, in 2023, I was at such a low point in my life that I started dating a man who was incredibly abusive. Now, not physically, however, he was extremely manipulative and verbally abusive to me, and I just took it as usual. But I mean, my father set this terrible example as I grew up of how a man treats a woman, and my mother would take it, and so I saw her setting that example too. For example, when he left jail, I don't remember this, but when he was released from jail, she took him back right away. A child needs to be raised in an environment where the father is loving and caring, respecting the mother. The mother is loving and caring. Not what I was raised in. It is so fucking dysfunctional, and that's what I kept finding myself in throughout my life. Even female friends of mine, friends, I use that term loosely, but I would be in abusive situation with friends too. Anyway, this guy was so mean to me. The world revolved around the size of my body. He was so disgusted with me. He named me Miss Piggy. I had to report to him daily. Did I diet? Did I exercise? He tried to get me to do intermittent fasting. And then he tried to get me to starve myself doing the Christian Bale extreme diet of 240 calories a day. He tried to get me to stop taking all of my medications to be healthier. He tried to control my personal time. He said that I spent too much time doing Lego and diamond dots. He tried to control my finances and was continually criticizing me for spending money on myself. He was conditioning me to only speak to him when I am pleasant. So if I were upset and I tried to text him about something, he would ignore me until I became pleasant again. And if I was upset about something, he would say to me, "Have you been drinking, Joanna?" I was drinking just to fucking cope with this guy. He made me feel pure rage, and I still put up with him. I once tried to tell him about my knee reconstruction. I said, "Oh, my knee is starting to hurt me a little bit." And I was going to say, that the military surgeon did a good job 20 years ago if my knee is just starting to bug me now. He cut me off and he said, "Well, if you lost some weight, your knee wouldn't be giving you trouble." Now, I have the type of sleep apnea that even when I'm skinny, I have it. However, I started talking about my sleep apnea and then he cut me off and said, "Well, if you lost some weight, you wouldn't have sleep apnea." The fucking world revolved around my weight. And I was at the point where I was hanging blankets on the mirrors in my house. He was so manipulative and so mean to me, and I just took it. I'm at the point now where I will not date anybody because I don't know if I bring it out in men, this abusive nature, or if I just pick the wrong men. I don't know. But in order to protect myself, I need to remain single. And that is when I am at my happiest. I just have one more really extremely stressful hurdle in the near future. I have to testify at a trial and I'm terrified. Once that is over, I can finally start moving on with my life and working on healing and focusing on my peace. Here's another email from my father where he's calling me a whore. I now am the military whore due to my military service. I don't know any other man who speaks to his daughter this way. I went to a special school when I went into foster care for troubled kids. It has a smaller teacher to student ratio. There's a teacher's assistant, and they're more lenient with children who act up. So my father used to call me dummy, retarded, stupid foster kid. And I believed that I wasn't intelligent enough to attend a regular high school until grade 12. I was in a high school called West Wally, but I was in the alternate program. And then I was going to adult continuing education schools until I finally decided I'm going to try going to regular high school to see if I can do it. I graduated a year late, but I went to regular high school. Next thing you know, I passed military basic training. And then however many years later, I'm qualified to teach a fucking basic training. I had to teach myself and learn on my own that I am capable of doing things. I can succeed. And I did succeed. But it was with no help from my parents. Most people who age out of care, who have similar upbringings as I do, end up on the streets, end up involved in crime, in prostitution, on drugs. And I would surround myself with bad friends too, like female friends. I'm using that term loosely, but one woman whom I call the mega cunt now, because cunt just doesn't do her justice. I'll call her MC from now on. She said that due to my upbringing and past, she's surprised I'm not on Hastings Street with a needle hanging out of my arm. She was so mean to me, and I would pick her up with a coffee to take her shopping, and I would drive her around everywhere just because she didn't want to drive. She had 3 vehicles, one for her business that she shared with her husband, and then her husband had a vehicle and she had a vehicle. Nope, I drove everywhere. We were at lunch and she told me that half of my face is larger on one side. You don't think I fucking know that? Another time we're at a busy store and I said, oh, I like these earrings, but they don't mirror each other. She got that stupid fucking look on her face again. And then she started coaching me slowly, loudly, and clearly, mirror, mirror, to get me to pronounce mirror how she pronounces it. And it was so embarrassing. Another time I was sad about something. I was dating that loser and I was feeling really down, and I said, you know, I'm really thankful we're friends. I'm glad we're hanging out and stuff. And she says, well, you know, you are crazy. She once invited me to her friend's birthday party at a restaurant. So I picked her up and I drove us out there. And turns out her friend didn't like me because she thinks I'm a butch. Was her only other friend. And she knew that her friend didn't like me, but she wanted a ride, I guess. And then another woman invited us over to her house for more drinks after the party. And I said, no, I should be getting home now. So what does MC do? She leaves and goes with them. And I went home by myself. So I picked her up. I drove her there. I sat like an idiot while nobody really spoke to me. And then, well, because her friend didn't like me. And then I went home because she took off with them. Like, this woman was really abusive and really mean to me. But I would allow it. I would take it just to hang on to these relationships. Anyway, I'm going to cut the video off now. So I might make another one where I show more of these emails and foster care documents if anybody is interested. So yeah, thank you for watching.